Welcome to the Mindset Game podcast. I'm Vered Kogan and very excited to introduce you to Adria Trowhill. Adria is a master certified coach who is a trailblazer in the arenas of leadership and leadership team coaching, having recently been awarded a Lifetime Achievement Award by the International Coach Federation, also known as ICF. She created the Living Systems approach for coaching collaborative work groups and intact teams, and has worked with senior executives and teams in North America and abroad since 1994. Adria has been recognized as the Canadian Coach of the Year and was featured in numerous publications, such as the Financial Post, Globe and Mail, and Choice magazine. She is also a four-time recipient of the prestigious PRISM Award, which honors coaches and companies that have been able to demonstrate outstanding performance through the integration of coaching into their culture. Now, I met Adria through the Adler International Learning Coaching Program, where she is a founding faculty member, and I got to participate in her Living Systems approach team coaching training several years ago. And Adria, it is absolutely a pleasure and an honor to have you here with us. Thank you.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
So how about we kick things off by having you share a little bit about your story. How did you get to doing this really phenomenal work that you do in our world?
Well, you're too kind, but thank you. Uh, it was a funny thing that happened. Um, I wasn't even a coach. I was approached by the general management team at Searle Canada, whose boss, who was Shapiro, I think his name was, tried an experiment. He put in a group of 9 people as the GM, and they were supposed to run the company, which was a pharmaceutical company. But they didn't get along all that well. And they needed some kind of help. So they called me in and they told me they wanted me to be their coach because I'd done some work with that company. So, they kind of knew me, but they told me they'd interviewed a lot of different people and they decided on me. And I thought, well, that's amazing because I didn't even know what coaching meant at that point. So they asked me would I do it, and I said yes because I'm an impact help. I'm a courageous person, and I don't mind embarrassing myself. So I said yes, I would do it. So then I had to go home and look it up online. What's coaching anyway, and what's a team coach do? So that's how I started, and I had really no knowledge of the pharmaceutical industry either. So I was a zero on both counts. Coaching and the industry that I was getting into. But that's how I started.
Wow. So cool that you shared that because, people sometimes, kind of dive into the deep end of the pool or they're thrown into the deep end of the
Right.
pool. And, it's a reminder that we can learn and adapt and figure it out.
That's right.
And we don't have to have it all figured out or to have the perfect knowledge of an industry before in order to really excel. And so tell us a little bit about what is the Living Systems approach? What
Well,
is
I've got
that?
the definition right here because it's a long definition, but really it's a results oriented process that supports a journey of discovery for the team and the development of team awareness, very much like coaching one-on-one. Actually, I based it on coaching one-on-one. It takes teams from where they are to where they want to be or what they want to be. So there's a doing part and a being part, and transforms them through conversation and experiential activities that evolve specifically from the team's unique context, which is relationship, mandate, and composition. I think that sums it up.
All right. So if you're willing, can we go a little bit deeper into some of those things and maybe even bringing it even more to life with some examples? Because there's so
Sure.
much richness there, and having participated in the program and using those activities, I'm a big believer in this work. And so, would you be willing to share with us kind of a little bit more of the heart of that definition, and what do people need to know in order to be even more effective leaders, whether it's leaders in their organization, in their family, or any other dynamic?
Well, they need to know how to engage people. And so, going back to when I started, when I didn't know anything, what I decided was I would have them tell me what I needed to know, right? So I believe in empowerment. I always have. And so I created some questions that I can now say are coaching questions around uh, exercise called Paradox of Change. And it's about somebody bailing a boat, two people out in a boat that's sinking, and the two people are bailing like crazy, trying to keep it afloat. And somebody walking by looks out and says, "Ahoy, what are you doing?" And they said, "Can't you see we're bailing the boat? Because if we don't do that, it'll sink." And he said, "So why don't you fix the hole?" And they said, "We don't have time to do that." And so that was, I think that's such a great story. And it really was very characteristics of teams and organizations at that time, right? So going very, very quickly and not really having time to fix the problem. So I think in the early years, I was really influenced by Peter Senge's work about single loop and double loop learning. So I wanted to make sure that whatever I do was deeper than just superficial. So it was very interesting that the questions really worked for them, and they practically took over the session after that, which people can do if they're given the freedom to do that.
Would you be willing to share with us just some of those questions in case someone's curious?
The first one was, what is the hole in the boat in terms of your organization? And the second one was, what can you do about this? And following that, what do you have to do? And who do you have to be? And then what values, what Searle values would you be honoring if you did this? Those are three of them at least. Yeah.
Oh, such important, powerful questions.
Yeah, they really were. And I didn't have any clue at the beginning that they would be. I had no coach training. I didn't know anything about coaching. They're still good now, those questions. They would be good now.
Yeah. Well, you trusted your intuition.
I did. And I would say that about everything that is in this approach. It came from my intuition. And I started out in life as a musician. So I've learned to trust my intuition. I mean, my intuition tells me what I need to be doing and who I need to be. So I did trust that right from the very start. And so I created exercise that people could really get involved in. I can't remember with that first team if I did one of my favorite exercise, which is the quotes exercise, where you put quotes around the room, quotes related to what the topic is, for example. And then you have people go around and read them and share what brings up for them. And in that, they learn. Like there's a learning in the discussion. Other people bring in ideas, they bring in ideas, but the quotes themselves have ideas for people.
Yeah. And
quick and easy.
And it's another way for us to kind of look at things through a different lens, because
right.
a quote can kind of enlighten us. And usually the quotes that happen to come in our path, whether it's through an email or something said on a podcast or some book or whatever it might be, it's usually exactly what we need to look at for us to access something that will help us.
That's right. Absolutely right. So I don't know. I always say I just channeled that in because I had never thought about coaching at all. I didn't even know about it. And I never worked that way with a team before. But
so you go into these teams, you ask them these questions that you've asked, you kind of help enlighten them with some quotes to kind of engage in conversation. Then what?
Well, then it depends. I mean, that's a good question. And people ask, what do you do next? It all depends on who they are and what they need to learn. So I describe the approach as emergent because I put out stimulus and the response comes from them. So it's about dialogues. I mean, I quite often create dialogues that everybody gets into about things that really matter for the team and things they have to think about. So they might speak to another team member one-on-one, and then maybe in a group of four, and then maybe come back to the main plenary session, and we talk about it there. So it's kind of it's an inside out model because we take participants from where they are internally, and I think this is a really important piece to where they want to go, but starting internally, what's happening for them, what are they experiencing. So working with the who, as the ICF likes to call it, the who, working with the who, and take them from their inner experience and move out as they evolve their answers to whatever the question are. And people learn right on the spot, just like they do in one-on-one coaching. I was always an astute observer of people. Right from the time I was a kid, it used to get me in a lot of trouble. Lots of trouble with my teachers.
And so, for those people listening who might be formally or informally leading a team or a group, whether it's a PTO group or a corporate group or whatever it might be, and there's some conflict in the group, perhaps, I'd love to hear from you. What are kind of some of the typical team conflicts that, people typically experience, and what can they do about them as formal or informal leaders? What's in their control or influence to create more harmony?
I think the main thing they can do is pay attention to their own presence. And by that, I mean how they show up and what kind of energy they bring into the team. Sometimes people freak out, like if something's bad and people are really fighting about something, and that happens, arguing, not physically fighting, but arguing. See, I was never bothered by that ever. And so what I do in that situation is I neutralize whatever is going on, but I also design, again, I'm maybe on the spot now, but in the beginning, I would have designed some kind of an exercise with questions that they could do, talk through not just the doing part at all. Like a lot of huge emphasis from the beginning on who do we need to be to solve this? Like, how do we need to behave to solve this? And the answers, of course, being unattached to our own ideas about things and being willing to follow the majority, be it operate in a democratic way. It's not all about one person, it's about the majority. And sometimes it's just diffusing it, like really giving every person an opportunity to say what they think is happening. So my favorite exercise for that, and you will remember it, is what's it look like from my chair? And let everybody talk. And I'm pretty bossy about the rules for that exercise. Yeah. People can talk up to 5 minutes. Sometimes people will say, I don't want to talk, but that's fine. You will sit here for your 5 minutes. We'll just sit and wait, which usually motivates them to start talking, but it doesn't always. So we just sit and no arguing, no challenging what people are saying. It's their truth, really listening as each person here has a truth that might be different from each other person here. So once we know that, what do we do with it? So it's basically, to me, it's creating something different. If you have some A thinks this and B thinks this, you can't go with either A or B, because it's going to annoy A and their followers. Or to go with B, it's going to annoy B and their followers. So what you have to do is bring them together to create the essence of both into one thing that they're willing to follow. That works to me very well. It does.
Yeah. And, it's that acceptance, right? And meaning respect. Yes, I don't need to see the world as you see it per se or agree with you, but I
That's
need to
right.
respect you. And it's interesting because everybody needs equal airtime, right? So giving
I
people,
agree.
whether it's 5 minutes in a non-judgmental open space to say, this is what it looks like from my chair, right? It's like the story I'm telling myself about this is, right? It's like just allowing them to share their perspective and for others to respect it. I think that does soften some of the extreme beliefs or perspectives, and it just kind of softens and maybe lessen some of the drama so that we can come to some
That's
democratic
right.
decision, if you will, that is the most acceptable to most of the people in the group.
That's right. And so I also have little comments that are meant to teach people. So one of the things I ask people to agree to, if I remember at the beginning, I say, you're going to be in a situation where you're going to disagree with an idea that the team's going to put forward. And you have to decide what to do. So I'm asking you to support ideas that your teammates support for the overall good of the team and for the overall process so we can keep moving. But if you absolutely can't do that, then you need to say it. But if you can, I want you to decide to. And I said, we don't always have to agree 100% for everything to support it. We don't need to. We can choose to support it. And so that's what I'm asking you. And then the other part of that is, and once you buy in to this idea, I need you to tell me that you'll stay in. Buy in and stay in. Not decide tomorrow morning, oh, I didn't really want to support that. That's not fair to the team.
So what happens if you've got like multiple strong perspectives and everyone's like, okay, I'm willing to respect your point of view, but I don't want to do it, right?
Well,
And
that's a good question, actually. Actually, that same team, there was one person there that did not want to be in coaching sessions and did not want to collaborate in the way we were asking them to. And so I talked to him, and I could see that basically he'd be better as an independent contributor. So I put that idea out for the team to think about, like, could David be an independent contributor? They thought that was a great idea. So from that day on, whenever they needed his input, he was brought in, but he didn't come to any of our meetings.
wow.
And afterwards, I saw a case study that recommended just that in the Harvard Business Review, but it hadn't come from there for me, you know. So, but it worked. Now he'd sit there with his computer. We all know anybody that's worked with him. He's typing away while I'm talking. You know, it just so he wasn't a good fit for being in the team. So he didn't have to be. Came and gave his 2 cents, and then he left.
Thank you, Adria. So let's say, we have a leader listening who's doing this, right? Giving equal airtime, so to speak, right? Time for people to express their truth, their version of the truth, if you will. What then? So they got these multiple perspectives potentially. What do they do to create that harmony?
So I think what you can do next is to have them all vote with stickies on which are their top three out of all these different things, and then just keep doing that. Choose one of the top three, and then ask the people that had a totally different perspective, like you said, with strong opinions, if they're willing to support it. You see, the other thing I would say is, if you really get the team used to working democratically, they understand and accept that everybody's not going to agree with everything. I mean, that's one of the key pieces. And actually, if nobody agrees, you can throw out the idea and start over. Honestly, I've done that too. This is not being accepted by 50% of your team. I would say to the leader, what do you think here? What do you want to do? And if he says, go on, just go on, force them to do it. I said, well, how do you think that's going to work in terms of, you know, trust and safety and being respected?
Oh,
I've
wow.
never, touch wood, so far had a conflict that didn't get resolved.
Well, certainly that brings hope, right, to those leaders or members of a team that are really struggling knee deep in some conflict, and it's really hard to see a way out of
No,
that.
it is. It really is. But I think I would say to that leader, take your time. Don't think you have to rush it through because it can't be rushed. And sometimes just don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, as they say, but come up with some other alternatives and get those people to work with the other people to come up with alternatives that would work for both of them.
And I love that you said earlier, this, do you support it? Kind of like that question. And I think that just asking the question allows them to be at a point of choice. It gives them
Right.
agency. And we know from research that when people feel a sense of agency, that they're much more likely to support the change or to kind of soften the resistance just
Right.
by consciously, deliberately stating that, expressing that, because there are little parts of them that are feeling, okay, I'm not being told to do this. I'm not a victim here.
That's right.
I am a, conscious, deliberate change maker. And so, what about kind of the typical topics that you see? So, when there are issues with teams, what are some of the main stressors or issues that can come up?
Well, one can be personality differences. Um, I'm going to say that I've done much work with teams, and very few of them have been around conflict. So one thing that came up, I was sent to a manufacturing company to work with the manager and the regional manager, who were always fighting about things, right? So one of the tips to leaders listening is don't jump right in and give the conflict a lot of energy, because that makes everything worse, right? So they wanted to help with communications because of these two people basically fighting in their meetings. So I thought about that actually for a minute, not for too long. So I said, okay, so let's look at this. So I got a piece of paper and I said, this is what we're going to do. On the left side, you're going to put down things that take you down, that demotivate you in terms of people's communication. And on the right side, you're going to put things that really motivate you and get you excited and positive when they communicate that way. And I'll ask you each to share it. So you're going to share it. So I gave them some time. And the first two people, it was fine. They answered it. And then we got to the regional director. He was the third person to speak. And he told the story of how when he was in high school, the principal of his high school came to talk to his parents and said that he wasn't university material. Well, that was an event in his life that changed his life forever. Like, he couldn't get past that. Like, he eventually did go to university, but anytime he was in a scary place, which we all are, and having to do something, his principal's voice, it became his inner critic, right? And he shared that with everybody, and actually was almost in tears. And he talked about his frustration, about his feelings of not being respected on his team that I was working with. He wasn't a member of that team. He was the regional manager, so in a way he was, but not really. So everybody listened, and they really shifted themselves. The whole team shifted and became empathetic with him. They wanted to know more about what happened and like what's happened to him in his life. But he was clear that that voice never left my head. You're not smart enough to go to university. And so whenever I get into a situation that I can't resolve, that voice comes back and says, we'll see, you're not smart enough to do this. But you see, the whole team, it was like a miracle. They all became very empathic with him, or empathetic, whatever word you want to use. And they they gave him lots of encouragement. you could just see him softening, and they all did. And we finished, we went around, finished the exercise, but the work had been done, really. And that's something I couldn't have planned that in a million years. I wouldn't have known that. I would not have guessed that could happen, but it did. And then they decided that I asked them what they wanted, how they wanted to move forward. And they said, well, maybe we just need another session with you to finish off. And that's it. I think we're okay now. And they were okay. So it gets back to underlying models people have that they carry into a team situation. So I would say to leaders, don't take it personally. Whatever happens is nothing to do with you. You might have triggered it some way, but it isn't. It's been there before. So understand that about people, and compassion is the best thing to move into, which is what this team moved into. So that really was the end of that, which was supposed to be a six half days, ended up being 2.
Thank you for sharing this story. I think it really demonstrates so much, right, when it comes to teams and the dynamics of any system, um, because it kind of is a mirror reflection of our inner system. So when we have extreme
Right.
perspectives, which is usually where conflict is birthed from, those extreme perspectives, as you said, are coming from something much deeper. It's just some automatic patterns that are being played out
That's
again
right.
and again and again for
Right.
essentially for survival. And when we can create a safe space, there's psychological safety to express, some stories from our past, right, that we either are becoming conscious of or maybe have known for some time, and to share that from our heart, it can create true, genuine compassion, which just kind of softens everything, and helps people to see the person versus the behavior, right?
Yes, it
Like
does.
more like rather than, hey, what's wrong with you here that you can't see the world through our lens, rather than like, what happened to her? What happened to him to make them so rigid in their perspective, so extreme, right? In terms of the
That's right.
duality. So how can we create that space? I know you've shared some examples of that, but for a leader that right now the culture is not quite there, the dynamic of the team, what, if anything, is in their control or influence to create that safety so people can share and have those kinds of breakthroughs?
Yeah. Well, I think there has to be ground rules. I was listening to Clutterbuck talking about his ground rules for teams. I don't agree with my ground rules for teams being the ones that they adapt. I personally feel that each team needs to create their own ground rules. And what I do is I wait until there is a reason. It's not something I automatically do when I walk into work with a team. I wait for an incident, and then I say to the team, I think we need some ground rules to help us deal with this. And that's what we do. So we create certain ground rules. And the other thing, I think the leader needs to make sure that the situation is safe. So one of the new ICF competencies is create safety. And you need to be strong enough to do that. So if somebody attacks somebody, you've got to step in and ask them a question. How is this contributing to moving forward on this issue? And hopefully they say it isn't. I mean, if they don't, somebody else will say, you're holding us up, right? So it all goes back to uncovering their mental models, how they see things, and making sure that you're the policeman for that. Like, don't allow anybody to dump on anybody else. It's just not okay to do that. And being firm about it. The other thing is don't have any favorites. We have to treat everybody the same. We naturally have favorites. I mean, I don't think human beings can help doing that, but it shouldn't show up. It shouldn't be visible in the workplace with the team.
And what are some of those ground rules that, of course, every team creates for themselves, but
Um,
what are some ideas?
so one idea is we don't criticize each other openly here. And if we have something to talk to somebody about, we do it one-on-one. That might be one, right? The other one would be don't interrupt people, listen for understanding. And so I will kind of add to their ideas. They would say listening, and I would say, well, listen for understanding. They wouldn't necessarily put that in, but yeah. And that whole idea of democratic principles being how we're going to work together. So majority rules, anything like that. Depends what it was. And as I say, when you're coaching a team well, there aren't too many things like that coming up because you've given people an opportunity to choose. You've given them an opportunity to express whatever it is they want to express. So, going back to how does it look from my chair would be another good idea there. It's like taking the pressure cooker lid off, don't do that. Anybody, if you're watching this, don't go into that. How they say it on TV, but letting people get it off their chest. And that's often enough. They don't need people to agree with them. They just need to have people understand what they're trying to say.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And so if conflict is not typically kind of a cause for bringing a coach, right, for supporting a team, what is it that typically teams would hire somebody like you for or want some help with? What is it that they could improve on?
Well, I think, and I love to do this actually, I think anything that's stalling the team from moving forward. There's a lot of bickering gets in the way. There's no real forward movement because they kind of get stuck, right? And so to me, stuck is an opportunity to look at, okay, what are the possibilities here? And you can even have a wheel on the floor, a wheel of possibilities, and have people stand in the different triangles. That works well too. It's about really having a voice. Everybody wants a voice. And I think people that get really conflicted feel that my voice hasn't been heard here.
Tell us a little more of the wheel of possibilities. What is that and how do we do it?
Well, what you do it is you ask them, so what are the possible approaches forward from here? And you just, what could be, we drop this and create something else. That could be one. It could be we drop it and just go on. It could be we take a day and hash it out. It could be anything. Like they create it themselves, not the coach. They come up with what they think might work for them. And then we do it just like we do the wheel of life. They walk around in the different squares. They look at the labels and they pick one to stand in. And then the coach asks them to explain why they stood there. They say that. And, often people are able to get people on their side just by explaining. People jump to conclusions a lot of the time. And they think they know what they're agreeing to, and they really don't. They haven't asked any questions about it. But when they understand it, sometimes they think, oh, well, that's okay. I can go with that.
So it sounds like a beautiful exercise for self-expression, right? Because you're choosing which piece of the pie, so to speak, right?
That's
what
right.
part
Absolutely.
you're standing on.
Yes.
So what then? Let's say you are a leader as coach, and right, you've got different people on your team, right, standing in different areas of the pie, and you yourself maybe are in one part of it that might be different than others. What do you do?
Well, you find out what comes out, where people end up standing, and then you find out where people would stand if you changed one thing. That's another way to do it. Okay, so say this seems to be the stickler. What if we took that out and put something else in it? Would you be willing to agree to it then? And they say yes, and then you can send them off in little groups to create what should go in there. And again, vote. A lot of voting happens with stickies, on the wall.
So what if it's a large team? Let's say your group is like 30, 40 people? Like, how could you
That's
possibly?
a
Yeah.
great question. That brings up another point I haven't mentioned. To me, a team's an attitude. It's not a number. I know I read, you can't have a team that's bigger than 8, or you can't have a team that's smaller than. I don't. I don't believe that. So here's the thing: if I had a team of 40 people, I would make five eights or 40. I'd probably make 5 teams. I might make 10 teams of 4, and they will work with their small team of 4 and talk about their ideas and present their ideas there. And then they bring it back to the plenary group. I actually did this once. There were 200 people in the room of HR people. And I had questions for them, and they went off in their own groups and talked about them. Then the leader of each group came back, and you can teach them things to pay attention to. For example, if they didn't choose a leader, then I explored with them. So what did you think was going to happen here? How did you think it was going to be clear with all 8 of you wanting to, to report back? There are all 4 of you reporting back at once. How is that going to work? Like it's things that if we know them and think about them, we will do them in the future, right? So they're learning how to go out and have discussions about what things matter, things that really matter, and then they know without having to be told every time. Pick somebody in your group to come and report it to the group, and then when all the groups of, let's say, 8 come back, 8 groups of 5 people, then we take their top 2, maybe put them up on the board, and then we ask people if they have any questions about what's up there. And if they do, they can ask the team to put that item up there, and then we vote.
And by top 2, is it top 2 challenges or top 2 possibilities or solutions? What would you be
It
voting
would
on?
be whatever they came up to. The top 2, possibilities to move forward, move the team forward. And I would have already done that discussion about holding up the team if we can't agree on things, and how important it is to buy in, even if you're not 100% in support. It's unlikely that we'll ever get something that each of you will support 100%. So you have to decide your own target. Can you support it 80%? I might even ask that. I can't support that. Well, what percentage of you could support it? 50%. So, and then the team says that they can accept that, and you keep going. So that it's everything's out on the table. I think that's the important thing. You don't hide from anything. And it gets tricky when it's the leader. Like I've been brought into situations where the leader is the problem. And so before I talk to the leader, I talk to the team and tell them what we're going to do, and for them not to be afraid to put down whatever it is, but put it down in a compassionate way. This is not an opportunity to get somebody. This is an opportunity to share your experience of somebody. And then we do that, and the leader gets to see what people are thinking and feeling. And usually they're surprised, and in a good way. Almost everybody I've ever worked with has agreed to consider what's being said.
And you bring up a really good point, which is kind of the safety to even express or share, right? If you're concerned that there might be some negative consequence for your well-being, for your family's security or whatnot, then people might not share. And if they don't share, then you don't really know what you're working with. Not everything is out on the table. So what can we do about that?
What you can do about that is you say at the beginning, whatever's in here stays in here. And that means, and I explain what that means. You can share any of the exercises, but the details anybody says cannot be shared.
So let's say it is kind of staying in the group, but even still, like somebody might be afraid that somebody within the group or the leader, if that's, part of the conversation, could hear that, and what would they think and how would they feel, and will that impact my career progression because I'm different than others? So again, what can we do to help people feel safe?
You have to make sure that anything that looks dangerous, you step in right away and stop it, and people, and make clear that people get to choose what they share. I've done a lot of work when the leader's been the problem. I have. And what I get from the leader and in front of the other people, if they're willing to commit to doing something about this behavior. And for me, sitting in on interactions they have with people to make sure that they behave the way they're supposed to behave. Yeah. In fact, I think that's one of my best capacities right there is enabling people that are in leadership to see and hear what other people think of what they're doing and what they have to change, and then go on to let people tell the leader what they have to change, and the leader responding by saying how he's going to track or she's going to track that she's actually changing this.
So if I were a leader that was very rigid in my perspective, if I was that leader, what might you say to me that will help me soften enough to be open and really present to the feedback that I receive?
I would probably guess that that's happening. I would know that's going to happen. And so I would talk to the team themselves and maybe one-on-one on how to say things that can smart. Sometimes things do smart, no matter how diplomatic you are about it, but you have to be clear. And I asked the leader, how do you want the feedback? So asking the leader how they want it, and they say, I want it straight out. A lot of people say that. I just want it straight. And then I would ask, and can you commit here publicly that if somebody says something you don't like, that there will be no repercussions? And they have to say that. And really, in terms of repercussion, on a team that wasn't the senior team, I work a lot with senior teams, I would make sure that the CEO or whoever was the person supervising these people would know about that situation. So at the beginning, I talk about the boundaries, and in that kind of a situation, I'd be telling them that, of course, that this cannot be kept confidential, and it probably isn't already. So then I teach them how to give feedback. I put in a feedback exercise. I don't know how this happened, but there's my other picture. It's did I do that? Take off the video?
Maybe by accident, yeah.
I'm not touching my.
There we go.
Okay, so it's you have to be strategic and you have to think. So instead of panicking when something like that happens, you think of a way to resolve it, and maybe with the team's help, or maybe with the leader's help.
And so, what do you think is one thing, in addition to everything that you've already shared today, so many beautiful gems and gifts and practical tips to apply? What is one thing that you wish for every person to know about that living systems approach that can help benefit them in all areas of their life in interacting with others?
That it's a dynamic process, that they get to lead the way as a group. I'm not going to come in and impose anything on them. They get to lead the way. And the other thing I think would be to remind them that even though something's smart, they're probably the things we need to learn, and we'll be out of our comfort zone, but that's where most of the learning occurs. So if you don't want any learning, don't ask anybody any questions about how you're coming across. And I mean, I kind of make it a joke. But.
Yeah. And it's so important as a reminder. So I'm so grateful that you brought that up, because ultimately we want to grow. We want to grow individually. We want to grow together as a community, as a society, as a planet. And so in order to evolve, that presupposes change, and right, that paradox of change that you brought up. And to be able to create harmony, that everybody's voice is worthy of hearing, of accepting. And only when we do that, when we lean toward one another rather than away from, can we even give ourselves a chance to truly choose what is most important for us and what we are willing to agree to.
That's right. Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Adria. I'm so grateful for your time today, for your wisdom. How can people learn even more about this incredible program that you've developed, maybe working with you or your team?
They can take my course, which will run in the fall, probably October. It's virtual. And I think what this course has is a very progressive, futuristic approach. So the word is woke. We don't do woke at all. Everything is created on the moment. And I like Amy Edmondson's actually teaming idea, because I think my approach is similar in some ways to hers. Teams can work together or break up. So that's another thing. People are moving, and in the situation where somebody doesn't approve of what the leader's bringing in, find them something else to do. Give them something else. I think that leaders have to be a lot more flexible than they've been in the past. And I think we need to do what coaching tells us to do: stay in the now, deal with the now. You can't have preconceived ideas about what you should do for strategic planning or what you should do for anything these days. So you have to be open to novel approaches to things and be able to adapt. The leader too. So even if you're not a coach, you can still come to this course. We've had people come, HR people, that have no experience coaching. Now, some of them have gone to coaching after, but it's
And
not
how
enough.
can they access more information about the course?
Okay. Just send an email to me at my name, Adria, at adriatrowhill.com. That's how easy it is. And I'd be happy to reply.
Yeah. Well, once again, Adria, so grateful and appreciative for your wisdom, for you trusting your own heart's wisdom to go down this path and learn as you go. And then, of course, to share those learnings with the world so that we can all take even better care of ourselves and each other.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. And I welcome anybody listening to come and join us for our course.